Okay, sticking to the agtech space, and we're now joined by another finalist in the Rabobank FoodBytes Accelerator Program. ProAgni is an agricultural biotech company that wants to give farmers the tools to reduce environmental impacts without footing the economic costs. To tell us more is CEO Lachlan Campbell, who joins us now. Hi Lachlan, welcome to the show.
To you both. How are you?
Well, we're great to have you on the show. So tell us, what do you get up to?
Well, I was a farmer up until about 5 years ago, and have, with the 4 other founders, started a business which has gone from modest means to a national distribution around Australia and an active interest in the US, not to mention what we've achieved with Rabobank FoodBytes.
So tell us a bit more about the product. So what animals are you targeting with it, and I guess the science behind it?
Yeah, look, probably the easiest way to start this is to start at the beginning of the story. And the genesis of ProAgni really came about because of kangaroos. Kangaroos have not only survived but thrived in Australia for nearly 20 million years. They emit very little methane, use very little resources such as grass or water, don't use any antibiotics, and in the same paddock sit my sheep and cattle. And to give you some numbers as to what I mean by their efficiencies, a kangaroo takes about 5 kilos of grass to put on 1 kilo of red meat, where sheep and cattle take about 20 kilos of grass just to do the same thing. And so ProAgni really asks itself, well, what if we could actually mimic kangaroos? What would that look like for the world if our sheep and cattle could do the same thing? And that's really where the business started. And the technology now is reasonably complex, but probably the easiest way to explain that is to think of sheep and cattle, which are called ruminants, as a keg on legs, a fermentation tank on legs. Now, inside that fermentation tank is a series of bacteria. Some of them are anaerobic and some of them are aerobic. So the aerobic stuff like oxygen, but the anaerobic stuff, which is 95% of that rumen, is the gold for ProAgni. It's the stuff that potentially can reduce methane emissions, reduce resource use, and take antibiotics out of the food chain. And so we've spent 5 years developing that technology platform, which has been rolled out for the last 18 months, both in Australia, and it's the reason we've gotten so far with Rabobank and with FoodBytes.
Okay, but I'm still just trying to understand. We've had lots of guests on the show who are using things like seaweed to try and reduce methane. I mean, I don't think you're suggesting that you're splicing kangaroo genes into your cattle. What's this technology doing here?
No kangaroos were harmed in this story. The easiest way to think about this is that it's an in-feed additive. Now, it's in 2 component parts. It's a probiotic and it's an anaerobic probiotic. So most probiotics are aerobic, and that is that they can tolerate oxygen. Anaerobic probiotics die in the presence of oxygen, and they are extremely hard to cultivate, stabilize, and commercialize. And it's one of the reasons you don't see them out in the marketplace, because they're virtually impossible to do. Now, we've actually captured that technology and then we've rolled it out. And that technology in itself has the ability and to use bacteria that naturally occurs in that fermentation tank to, instead of burping out methane, reabsorb it and use it as a food. And we've done some beta tests and some commercial tests in Australia around some of the other bacteria. And it's not so much the bacteria, it's actually the technology that we've actually are using to actually roll that really difficult bug out. And that is the why we're so different. It's why we've actually got the traction we've got and the speed at which we're moving. Now the other
I've got it, and this is absolutely awesome. Yeah. This is incredible. So tell us, where are you in your journey at this point in time for the startup?
Well, we launched one of our products into the Australian market about 18 months ago, and without any marketing, without any fanfare. In fact, you're looking at the Vice President of Sales. We drove to a regional outlet in New South Wales in Dubbo, and over a period and we use most of that product goes into sheep and cattle feedlots. And that product grew, it doubled in sales until now. I think we've sold over $3.5 million worth of product. We've fed over 1 million animals and taken over 1,000 kilos of antibiotics out of the food chain that would have otherwise been fed to those animals. So we're incredibly proud of what we've achieved. And that's technology that is actually patented. So it's one of the reasons the US have gone, well, look, if you're as good as you say you are, you better get over here and do this. And so the first steps around all that were to get some scientific trials to validate what we thought was happening and what we now know. And so we did some university trials at the University of New England, and then we've gone on to do trials at West Texas AMU, which is at the north of Texas, at the Panhandle. And that's really where the concentration of feedlots is. And that's really where our market and where ProAgni is deeply focused. And you've got to remember, in Australia, I think we've got around about 1 million animals in feedlots at any point in time. In America, it's about 30 million. So the market's, it's much, much bigger.
Now, you're one of only 15 companies in the world to make it into the FoodBytes pitch event. Tell us what you hope to get out of that. Is it investment, or is it to build your profile in the US market?
Oh, look, I think it's all of the above. The journey regarding FoodBytes is quite an extraordinary one. I think if you go back, it's one of the most prestigious startup pitching competitions in the world. And it's run because it allows serious investors with a deep interest in ag tech that are dedicated to that, to meet startups such as the Australian startups that have come out of that. And there were 5 at one point. So when we originally applied, there were 340 people wanting to get through to the last 45. We got through to the last 45, and then through a period of 3 nights, so we started at 1 o'clock in the morning and finished at 8 o'clock in the morning, because the whole thing's held on New York time. We got through to the last 5, which we're immensely proud of. And so we don't know whether we're going to win or lose, but for us, success has been that journey. And we've met some American investors who are very interested in what we've got. In fact, those conversations are progressing very quickly, and that interest is deep and wide. The second thing is it does give us a lot of exposure in the US market, because the people that attend these ag conferences are vested in agriculture, and they know that we've got an issue with our social license. We've got to change the way we produce food. And in 2050, I think we've got to produce 70% more food and not produce 70% more greenhouse gases. And trying to do that without adding a burden or a tax on farmers is, it feels like Mount Everest. Well, the reality is we're actually achieving that, and that's why we're through the last 5.
Lachlan, it sounds like that Vice President of Sales is doing a great job. I hope the CEO really, really appreciates just how good he is. Mate, great to have you on the show. All the best with it. Look forward to following what comes next for you guys. All the best in the US. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.